we need to talk. Have you ever done this? You're about to create a sound effect, you're doing a design for a project or whatever, and you find a sound that you think would be really cool for the project, you put it in your timeline, that's great, and then you go in and search for other layers, you find another one that you think would work really well, you grab that, you find another one here, you grab that one, you find another one there, you grab that one, and you just layer a bunch of these sounds together, and then you end up with garbage. Yep, and that's a problem. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about what I think is the biggest mistake that beginner sound designers make. So I actually had someone comment on one of my videos recently who was going through this exact same thing. They were basically saying how they like to they were going through a project, they were finding a bunch of sounds that they think would be really cool, and they just had a hard time deciding what to put in the layers. And he was not, or she was not, the first person to email me with this. They're not the first person to comment or to email me or to message me about this problem and how to find a solution. So I figured, you know what, I should probably make a video about this because I feel pretty strongly about how to fix this. All right, so let's talk about it. What is the problem here? Is the problem really overlayering? Well, yeah, in a way, part of it is overlayering. So if you're overlayering, what's happening is that you are basically putting a bunch of content, a bunch of sounds that are in similar frequencies. And what's happening is all these frequencies are going on top of each other. So you're just going on top of each other, on top of each other across the frequency spectrum. And it's just basically getting garbage because nothing is clear anymore. You don't have a clear definition of any sound. This is what we call masking. It's basically when one frequency is covering another frequency and they're both peaking and masking each other so that you don't hear either one of those sounds clearly. So there's a few ways to fix this. One, you can just use something like an EQ to cut out some of the frequencies from one sound that is masking the other sound so that one sound is going to be poking through for that frequency. You can use something like a compression, or you could just cut out one sound completely and use just one layer instead of the two layers that are masking each other. Okay, so that is a quick fix for that. But I still don't think that's the actual problem. I think the ultimate problem here, and this is what I believe is the biggest mistake that beginners make across any industry, by the way, across any artistic industry endeavor, and it's perfectionism, right? You grab a sound or two, you put it together, and you try to tweak parameters off on a plugin, or you grab an EQ, and you think that cutting out a certain frequency just a little bit here and there, putting on a compressor, and trying to find the exact perfect settings to make the sound just right, and then just trying to make it sound just perfect so that, then once I have this little EQ dip at 2K, then the sound's gonna be good. And it's like, these things they don't matter that much. Like, yes, sometimes there's a frequency that's really ringing out and it's really annoying, and yeah, maybe you want to cut it out then. But in general, cutting out any kind of frequency, any sound, any frequency in any sound, or boosting it for that matter, it doesn't matter, is not what's gonna make or break your sound effect. Ultimately, none of those things really matter because perfectionism isn't real. There's no such thing as perfect when you're creating sound effects. Everything's subjective. I mean, think about any sound that you think is really cool or really great. Like, you might think it's really great, and maybe a great majority of people think they're great, but who's to say that it's perfect? Like, you? No. Me? No. Like, who's making these decisions? It's kind of irrelevant. It's all subjective. So perfectionism is subjective. So instead of striving for something like perfection, I think we should strive for creating sounds that sound really good and that we can be really proud of. So my solution for this is not so much to go for perfection, it is to go for iteration. And let me explain this. So when we're focused on perfection, generally what's happening is we are trying to find the perfect sound and matching it with the other perfect sound maybe, and then finding the perfect EQ setting and perfect compressor setting. And what I suggest instead is not to focus on that, but to focus on what sounds good. So let's say you have two sounds that you put together. If they sound good right away like that, then focus on that. Let's say that's one iteration, okay? And now what I suggest to do is keep going down that path. If you're going to add another sound, let's say you're going to add a third layer to your sound effect, and you think that it sounds really good, maybe you need to cut a bit, maybe you need to add an EQ or something because some stuff is clashing, and great, do that, and then that's your third iteration. And then do that, keep going through this as you're adding layers, as you're adding sounds, as you're processing it, and stuff like that. For every layer that you're adding, that's another iteration. Save each one of these separately, so that then whenever you have, let's say, my suggested is like 5 to 10, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. But when you have, let's say, a certain amount of sound effects that you have done, let's say 10, then you can go back and listen to each iteration, to each sound effect that you created, and see which one you actually like, which one sounds good, and which one perhaps doesn't. And then now you can analyze why that is, and maybe put your focus on the ones that do sound good and why you think it sounds good, and then keep doing more of that. Ultimately, as you keep doing this, you're going to become more creative because you're going to think about ways that you can make sounds that sound good the way that you think they sound good. And working this way is going to help you shift your focus from perfectionism towards creativity. And that's what really ultimately matters, is that you never want to be focused on perfection. You want to be focused on being creative. If you can focus on creating and being creative, then you can always create more. You can always do more. You can always create better. You can always create different sounds, better sounds, right? So that is what I suggest to do. And that's what I think is the ultimate answer, the ultimate way to overcome this perfectionism and to overcome this biggest mistake that sound designers make. All right, so for your next project, I hope that's what you're going to focus on. Focus on being creative rather than being perfect. If you've ever done this, why don't you let us know down below so that people know that they are not alone when they're doing this. Everyone's done this. Everyone has focused at one point or another on being perfect, or at overlayering stuff where they're just adding layers and layers because they think it's going to sound cool, and then it just doesn't. So yeah, let us know. If you have any questions, leave them down below. And by the way, if you've made it through this far into the video, I have a gift for you. It is my Sound Designer's Starter Pack. It's a sound pack I put together. There's over 900 sound effects to help you get started in creating sound effects in sound design. So if you want to grab that, it'll be free. Link will be in the description below. All right, if you want to see another video to help you create better sound effects, I made a video about a year ago on using reference sounds for creating sound effects. And I'll put a link in the cards above here if you want to see it. But basically, I go over how I use reference sound effects to basically make better sound effects, to help improve my sound creation process. So if you want to see that, I did a whole video about it. You can check it up there. And that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.